Team coverage starts right now with Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo in Warsaw and Annmarie down in D.C. Maria, what's the latest?
Well, Jonathan, the Russians say this operation will continue. By that, of course, we mean the attack now on all fronts on Ukraine. They say will continue until they meet all of their targets. Of course, we know that in reality, that means that the government in Ukraine, led by President Zelensky, would have to go. The country would have to give up its weapons, become neutral, and, of course, ditch that pledge to join NATO and the European Union. The reality on the ground in Ukraine becoming ever more concerning. We're seeing that this is now a full escalation on the military and combat front. We've seen yesterday footage, horrific footage of fighting that now targets essentially everything. This is not just about military points. And I had a European official telling me the nature of the war changed last night with that bombing that hit residential offices. Meanwhile, at the same time, we have the Ukrainian president today addressing Europeans, saying you need to do more. You need to step up, whether it's weapons or sanctions. Russia's now behaving like a terror state. Having said that, when you speak to Ukrainian officials, they say this is day 6, but they will continue to fight, and the will to resist is there. So again, the concern, of course, is that we're going to see a big escalation as Russia becomes ever more impatient about what is now a much longer war than they anticipated, Jonathan.
Companies around the world adjusting to a lot of this. Just getting a headline from VTB. VTB Commodities Trading Unit is winding down metal positions. Annmarie, the talk's ongoing. There are hopes for more talks. The base case of how that turns out, I have no idea. What we do know from this morning is that China and Ukraine, Annmarie, spoke. What was the outcome of those talks?
Well, China has been pushing for Ukraine and Russia to have discussions about this, to end this invasion, although China is very careful on how, of course, they word all of this. China, of course, has been walking this very fine line. We saw them at the UN. They didn't go for a veto, but they did abstain alongside India, the United Arab Emirates, we should note as well, considering that President Putin this morning spoke to Mohammed bin Zayed of the UAE. But right now, Jonathan, China is evacuating their citizens, and what they want to make sure is that civilians are protected. That was the outcome from the foreign minister speaking. They want to make sure that civilians are protected. And the reports that we're seeing with the mayor of Kharkiv saying that Russia is now bombing and attacking civilian areas. This is not just military operations.
Hearing this, Secretary Yellen spoke with the French finance minister about Russia as well. Looking at the commodity moves we're seeing at the moment, you can imagine why the administration is so focused on what could happen here at home domestically off the back of this AMH. Brent at 103, WTI at 100. We caught up with Devon Energy recently here at Bloomberg. The quote from the CEO read as follows: "I'm a little mystified that there hasn't been some dialogue between them and the administration." The CEO went on to say if they were to reach out and maybe had a little bit more of a collaborative approach, it might provide some cover from investors who might be annoyed with them for doing more, for pumping more, investing more. Annmarie, can you believe that there hasn't been that outreach from this administration to the oil patch to boost production here at home in America?
Yeah, this is going to be one of the issues the president's going to have to address this evening, right, Jonathan, when he gives his remarks to State of the Union, because the foreign policy issue he's dealing with right now, and he's becoming a wartime president, means higher oil prices. And back home in the United States, to everyday consumers, that trickles down to higher gasoline prices. And Russia is a commodity superstore, so actually it means higher prices in general. We could see higher wheat prices, aluminum, palladium, etc., and all these things feed into the supply chain, and that can mean higher costs for everyday consumers. Jonathan, I do know that there have been some company outreach within the administration. I wrote a story about how Exxon was going to have to be one of those companies that had to shift banks to make sure they continue to pay their workers, because one of the banks the U.S. administration was going to sanction was one that Exxon used. I know you just read that headline off about VTB. We should also note that Europe today, our reporting shows a draft list of what those de-swifting banks can be. VTB is one of them, and they are one of those banks that is highly integrated in the energy trades.
AMH, the spillover, I don't know if we quite fully understand, have got our hands around how big this might be. AMH over in D.C., Maria Tadeo in Poland today. Maria, thank you.